Morning, folks. Wherever you are out there, welcome. You are listening to the Charge Life podcast. I am Joseph Barletta, and this is where we discuss EVs and all things EV charging. So glad you could pull over and park with us today. Hey, let's get plugged in. Okay, today's episode is all about Texas Department of Transportation Innovation Initiative and UT Smart Mobility Symposium summary. You guys are going to love this one. Before we begin today's episode is brought to you by Smart Charge America. Since 2007, Smart Charge America has installed tens of thousands of EV charging stations, and they can do the same for you today. Just go to their website, www.smartchargeamerica.com, to get started. Okay, Texas Department of Transportation Innovative Initiative. That one's pretty tough. So essentially, this was a conference done last month. It was done a few weeks ago. It was out in San Antonio on July 30th through 31st. It's pretty cool. It was actually pretty cool to see the likes of like what the Department of Transportation is actually doing. Now, and this is of course the TXDOT, which is the Texas Department of Transportation. They put on this seminar. It's basically a huge conference where a bunch of innovative products around roadway transportation and safety, kind of everything you see while you're driving, these guys basically put it on the road. Reflectors, paint, striping, cone protection. I mean, everything you see while you're driving, these guys are involved in. And so I thought it was pretty unique. I mean, we had a speaking arrangement there where we discussed, the proponents of level two public EV charging, what some of the things that people can actually look forward to with regards to like wireless charging, with some of the difficulties that are facing and challenges that are facing, integration and execution on public EV charging infrastructure. How does that kind of align with TxDOT's like traffic, you know, patterns and everything else that they have? So that was pretty interesting. I also got to learn about like the what is it, four different types of hydrogen, and the fact that like comparatively, if you look at setting up a public level two charging station, you're probably averaging somewhere around $7,000 per port. And with a hydrogen fuel cell station, you get $5 million per port. That's literally, and that's literally, it takes years to get that infrastructure into the ground. And so we basically kind of all figured out that hydrogen fuel cell really isn't going to work with light to medium duty vehicles. It only works with heavy duty, you know, on the final day, believe it or not, they had a pitch show, which I was just like, this is awesome. It was basically a pitch, like an AI pitch show. It was where they were encouraging local agencies and municipalities to come together, and I believe it was six municipalities across Texas, and they would pitch to a panel of judges their their problem, like what's the city's problem, and how will they use a $75,000 grant for the winner that comes from Texas Department of Transportation to inject AI into its initiative on, a traffic solution of some sort, that they are trying to solve. I thought that was pretty cool. And so each municipality had, a representative get out there, talk about the problem, talk about what they're trying to do to face it, and talk about where the money and how the money would go to fixing it. And I thought it was pretty intuitive. It helped me understand like the fundamentals on really paying attention to what you're pitching for, why you're pitching for, and almost treat it like a scientific experiment. Develop your hypothesis, figure out your results, come to a conclusion, that sort of thing. So anyway, guys, if you can, go ahead and click the thumbs up icon below. Share, comment, subscribe, do all those good things. The Google algorithms really loves it. By the way, this is the first time that we're doing an actual live stream with our microphone setup, which it's not so. You guys and share some of you. Like this was one of the pictures we had on the like the innovation initiative here. What is it? It was pretty good chunk of people that were there. Very much organizations from all around attending. I thought it was really cool content there. So other than that, I don't have. Let's see here. Let me go. much going on with that one. I was a speaker. It was kind of on a special panel towards the end of the end of the actual conference itself. I think everyone was kind of basically just kind of worn out from the amount of information and overload that took place. It was really cool to talk to people that necessarily aren't in the EV charging industry, but in the traffic related industry. So I thought it was a pretty good, conference. I hope that they invite me next year to talk a little bit more about infrastructure and maybe a little bit more on the Texas NEVI funds and how TXDOT had applied and received the NEVI funds and how they're rolling those NEVI funds out and what are the results are and what are we seeing in the marketplace. So I really hope that they invite us again next year. So the second part of this was the UT Smart Mobility Symposium. So let me see if I can share screen with you guys on this one. So the Smart Symposium was based. I don't know if I can say what it was. It was so we have a joint venture program that we got into in 2022 with the UT University of Texas, as well and the Department of Energy to showcase what the like statistics wise on how beneficial it would be for fleet drivers to assume class 4, class 5 trucks. Now these are like the typical like box moving trucks. If you think about like a moving company, like these are those trucks, kind of around that type. And so like if these trucks were to be electrified, like what would that mean for the fleet that owns it, right? What's the potential for range, cost of fleet maintenance, all of that good stuff. So it was a joint venture project that we had, and we did pretty good. I mean, we were in charge of the infrastructure side of things. So UT would provide the actual truck to the fleet. They would have all the contracts, together, and then we would go to fleet location, fleet location, fleet location, and we would put it in the charging station. It was just one charging station, and it was per truck, and there was two trucks, and so we had to kind of like bounce around from different fleets. But ideal wise, we would put it in. The fleet would use the truck for 3 months as often as they could to try to collect data, and then the data would be assumed by the Department of University of Texas, and they would translate the data. And so that joint venture project was closing and coming to an end, and the Smart Mobility Symposium basically kind of showcased that and amongst a bunch of other initiatives that the UT was actually working on. And so a part of that was like the results. Like, what were the results of that study? Okay, well, we went to 9 different fleets and we placed this truck inside 9 different fleets, over for 3 months each, and here are the results. And so it was an interesting breakdown. One of the things that one of the trucks had like a 220-mile range, and basically the fleet operator was like, yeah, it was basically 50% of that, that was usable, real world usable. So it was like, wow. So like the efficiency of the powertrain and the actual usage of it, when you're dealing with fleets, they're putting a lot of weight in those trucks. So you know was most likely calculated just empty, which I don't know why range would be empty. Like you should have a certain minimum weight, distribution throughout these trucks. If you're gonna put a range on them, you need to put, maybe if their max weight capacity is 20,000 pounds, you need to put half of that in the car if you're gonna, in the truck, in the back of the truck, if you're gonna use it for testing, something like that, to get the range numbers. But they also talked about parking was difficult because they necessarily couldn't park it where the standard fleet would be parked. They had to park it near the building where it was easier for us to set up the actual charging infrastructure for the vehicle. So parking was a little tough because some of them had a makeshift, parking arrangements. And the range, of course, we talked about that being literally cut in half. And if you're looking at fleets in Texas, I mean, Texas is pretty big, I mean, wherever you go, you're probably 40 miles going there, miss a U-turn, 40 miles back, you're already on empty. Like it doesn't really allow you to really move around, maneuver around enough, depending on your fleet, you know, travel, time and all that good stuff. Outfitting the trucks are just a box truck, so you really couldn't do any customizing or outfitting and tying straps and stuff like that. So we saw that some of the fleets really couldn't use the truck like they were using the other box trucks in their fleets. So that was kind of lesson learned. And then charging time, they complained on the charging time because the battery was so large, we were basically just putting in a 60 amp, 40 amp. It was basically a 60 amp, 48 amp continuous draw level two charger that they were replacing on site. And that charges somewhere at around 11.5 kW. So the battery pack's 150 kW. It's going to take like 10, 12 hours to reach a full charge. And that's with, kind of the standard. And so that we didn't have enough funds in the project to actually supply like DC fast charging to each and every single one of those sites. But it was the charging time. They were just, they would plug in and then they would come back the next day and it'd finally be pretty, fully charged. And it's like, yeah, well, you drive it a lot. It's going to take 10, maybe 8 to 10 hours to charge. And they were expecting, basically a 3 minute fill up like they do with their diesels. So, which is fine. It's totally fine. Just kind of a different way of doing it. And then, of course, the motors on the actual um, mechanism on the truck the fans were always on, so it was very noisy. You're not dealing with like like really uh, like you would with a four, F-150 Lightning. You're dealing with a customizable box truck that was for this experience. So yeah, it's not going to have the most efficient powertrain, nor the most efficient, battery management system and thermal management, cooling, indicators and systems and fully integrated approaches and all that stuff. It's just everything's going to be kind of ad hoc on that particular truck. And so those are some of the things that we discovered from the symposium. Symposium was I got to speak on Charge America, and basically we went over kind of what we're seeing with regards to inject AI into our mix, but then also how we need to look at what's existing out there when it comes to charging scenarios and figures of being able to use AI or some sort of intelligence to more of a asset allocation mix throughout your infrastructure. Like so, for instance, for the state of Texas, there's by the end of this year, there's supposed to be 300,000 EVs in the state, like on the roads in Texas. Okay, well, if your charging occurs at home and 10% occurs in the public, then you need to start making a plan. You need to push a plan and get all the utilities and PUCs involved and incentives to adopt EV charging infrastructure at a massive scale to be able to keep up with a certain percentage of EVs that are actually live on the roads today. So we use the 90-10 example. So if 90% of your charging occurs at home, that means 10% occurs in the public. So that therefore, if you have 300,000 EVs on the roads, then you basically take 10% of that. And that's how many EV chargers you need on the roads to be able to support that EV 300,000 EVs on the road by the end of this year, you need to have at least 30,000 EV charging stations, on the road. And so our presentation was basically just a real quick synopsis of showing them, hey, look, if you have, 300,000 EVs, you need 30,000 charging stations. Now, of that 30,000 charging stations, you need to have a mix between level two and DC fast charging stations. And so, in that case, 90% of those funds should go towards fast charging, and then 10% should go towards. And so that's if you have the available funding, because the the cost per port to put in when it comes to DC fast charging is an order of magnitude than the level two chargers. But you have to coexist with both. It's just more people will need the DC fast charging, stations in those spots 50 miles apart from one another, scattered throughout the entire state in order to make them feel comfortable about driving throughout the state. And so see the state of Texas only has, about 9,600 chargers right now, and 2,800 DC fast chargers, and about 6,800 level two chargers. And so if you look at where we need to be at 30,000. We're only at 96. So we need about a four times capital injection on putting in like four times more when it comes to level two charging. Look at the actual the presentation itself. We cued in on several things like infrastructure costs. You can see the difference in like the power. So price per port. Now these prices are based off of having 10 charging stations or more on site. And so if you have a site with 10 350 kW EV chargers, it's pretty much almost a $2 million site. You can see $215,000 per port on that end. That's construction, charging station, everything that's included. If you're looking at 50 kW chargers, you're probably looking at somewhere around $70,000 installation per port. Now that's all things considered. Again, that's the charger, that's the installation, all of that. That's what we're getting from that end. Well, if you look at level two, you're looking at about $7,000 per port. And so right now, the state of Texas basically is receiving over the next 5 years $408 million from the Texas Department of Transportation over the NEVI funds in order to put these EV infrastructure in. So my case was, hey guys, by 2030, the state of Texas is slated to have 1 million EVs on the road by 2030. So we should take these funds and we should allocate the funds to result in the best mix out there for us. And so that being said, if we were to take the 90/10, spend 90% of that funding on DC fast charging stations, which is the 408 million, you can see that $367 million would be spent on DC fast charging ports. That would basically get us right aligned on where we need to be by 2030 with regards to the percentage of DC fast charging stations to level two chargers. You see 41 million being spent on level two public charging infrastructure, which will result in an additional 5829 ports. So you can see of a million EVs on the road, we need 100,000 charging stations, right? Of that 100,000, you flip it, you need 90,000 level twos and 10% level, DC fast chargers. So you need 10,000 DC fast chargers. So with those funds, about halfway where we need to be with DC fast charging stations, but it's still a goal, it's still a plan. Put push have a plan, have it proportionally, raised with the level and the number of EVs on the road, and push everything you have to adopt that plan and execute it. So and incentivize it most importantly. So you can see through this, you can see that by the end of 2030, we'd have 12,600 level two public charging ports where we need 90,000. So the private market's injection into public charging infrastructure would have to be 2x on the DC fast charging side of things, and it had to be 7x on the level two fast charging side of things. And that's if we did everything the way that we need to. So other than that, that's what my presentation to the audience members at the Smart Mobility Symposium was, and basically talking a little bit about that joint venture project that we did have with the Department of Energy and UT. So both of these shows, honestly, were really good to get out of the office and attend. We met some really good people there. We networked, tried the best we could to make the most of the time that we had and make a presence there. Now I hope to be a part of both of these shows next year as we try to offer what we can to teach the industry honestly in hopes to accelerate the electrification of sustainable transportation. I mean, that is the goal. Guys, thank you so much for your time listening today. Run, but look, I hope this episode has brought to you guys just a little bit more value to you today. I love you guys, and yes, I can't do this stuff without you. So please comment, like, thumbs up, click, subscribe to our channel if you think we earned it. And again, you can always find us. Keep us in mind. You can always find us at smartchargeamerica.com. And remember, folks, if you can't charge, you can't drive. We'll see you next time. Cheers.